Now, let's deal with Kuku Kwatin's pet subject. We are dealing with the petroleum deregulation that we are told has now come to Ghana. So now the downstream petroleum activities have been deregularized, is it? Deregulated, so that government has no role to play in it forever. The OMCs are going to be in charge and ensure that they have competitive prices. That's what we are being told. And the new one started with a 4% hike in fuel prices. We are being told that this is not true. This is just a government that is out of ideas or is being pushed by the IMF to implement a deregulation policy that will push the people further down poverty. Almost every 2 weeks, fortnightly, we're going to have prices go up. That's according to Dr. Anthony Akotosei, who leads the minority on these important economic matters. How true is that?
Yes, it is true that this 4% fuel price hike has nothing to do with deregulation. It is the normal price increases announced by the NPA. And if a policy of deregulation or partial deregulation is starting, I think it ought to be announced properly. To start with, the current, I've already made a point that the 4% has nothing to do with deregulation, and if you look at the announcement, it still exempts premix and I think one of the other fuels.
Yes, I'm aware of premix.
Yes, premix and one of the other one of the fuels. So it is a usual thing where the NPA announces prices and then we all comply. That is the 4%. But when I listen to the chief executive of NPA and the other senior staff of NPA, I get a sense that we are moving into a regime of, in my opinion, partial deregulation. I would explain that briefly. We're moving into a regime, and my suggestion to the NPA is for this to be spelled out clearly to answer many of the issues that are being raised, so that the policy can be supported. Because I think deregulation was an element that came with the passing of the National Petroleum Authority Act 2005. It is, for me, a good policy, and I think it ought to be managed properly so that it can be supported. What is deregulation? The same way that people import, let's say, paracetamol, and they sell it at any price they want. The only reason people are not selling paracetamol for 1,400 Ghana cedis is competition, that if you did that, other people will not buy it. So you are compelled to sell it at a reasonable price that would make your business competitive. Now, in respect of fuel, what we had before 2005 was if be it government or individuals, if they imported, then government would decide the price at which you can sell it. And then the 2005 law came, the National Petroleum Authority Act came, so that all government would do is to, together with the importers, determine the ceiling. So it says the NPA has a responsibility to ensure that while people charge the prices they want, dictated by the forces of the market and competition, they must not go beyond a certain ceiling. And the responsibility given to the NPA under the law is to ensure that indeed people do not go beyond the ceiling.
Okay.
So from 2005, the OMCs should have been deciding their own prices so long as they operated under the ceiling. That is not what we have had. What we have had has been government through the NPA coming out to announce price, and then every service provider wants to sell very close to the ceiling or at the ceiling. And then occasionally government comes in and says, even the ceiling that should have been determined, that should have been announced, charge less, and that me, government, I'll bring you the difference. And then government never sends the difference to the importers, and sometimes to TOR, And we call that under recoveries. And a time came when we used to call it tort debt. It accumulates and it becomes a debt for all of us. So government goes to borrow money to clear that debt. So the point I'm making is that the partial deregulation is partial deregulation because there's a ceiling. That came with the 2005 Act, has never been allowed to operate well. The sense I am getting from the National Petroleum Authority is that now we want to do it well, the way the law says it. Whether this is the best time to do it when the cedi is falling, and therefore, if you deregulate, then the prices will just be changing with the cedi. Whether it is the best time to implement this policy in order to let people love it is something the NPA will have to consider. 2, at the time crude oil prices were dropping, deregulation would have been a very loving policy if it had been implemented, because deregulation would have said prices should come down, because government's hands are off, because it is not always that government is there to subsidize. In fact, sometimes government has been there to make money out of people, out of petroleum. And it was the subject of the matter we took to court in 2011 and won that government can't do that. But really, government has been doing that even after the court ruling. So the timing, I think, is something the NPO have to look at carefully. But I think it is time for government to leave petroleum pricing. The ceilings are okay. After operating for a while, if we consider that we want the ceiling in place, we want the ceiling removed so that no ceiling, no nothing, the prices are, I guess, controlled by market forces, that is okay.
Do I hear you say, in principle, this is it, we are not against any deregulation of the sector?
Yes, I've heard Dr. Akutose speak, and he speaks of other aspects, and I agree with him on those ones. Even Tarzan raises some issues that are important. On all those things, we can look at the issues you're raising and address them. But what I'm saying is that this policy, that there will be a ceiling, every OMC and the BDC should determine their prices under the ceiling, came with a law. And the reason I speak like this is that I'm very confident the next government would be a new patriotic party government. And I don't want this administration to leave any under recoveries there for us to handle. And therefore, so long as they do things right in accordance with the law we passed in 2005, I don't see why I should oppose it.
And Dr. Anthony Akutose's argument primarily is that the law ought to be amended first. What exactly is there what tweaking is required?
It is because of the way the NPA presented it. See, when you let it look like the OMCs can sell it at any price they want and government does not come in, then you are really saying that there's no ceiling.
Okay.
If there's no ceiling, then the law has to be amended. That was the point Dr. Akuto said. That's why I said that all those points are legitimate points. Now, I think it's for the NPA to tell us clearly what they want to do. Because when I listen on some occasions to their leadership, I hear the NPA will only come in if you go beyond the cap, which means, in a certain sense, the ceiling is still there, and that will be the law. But when, again, sometimes you hear government would have nothing to do with the prices and the OMCs will determine and sell it at a price they want, then you are tempted to believe that they really want to remove the cap, the petroleum pricing formula that dictates the cap, and to do and to let the OMCs charge their own prices. If that is what we want to do, then we need the NPA will need to come to. So to conclude.
So for as long as that is not what it is, but this is partial deregulation. So long as it is in tandem with law. It's in compliance with law.
That's what I believe.
So you don't have any problem with that?
I don't have any problem with it. I think the concern of people out there is if you deregulate and people can now charge any price they want, then it's a problem. And I've heard many people say we cannot leave this one to market forces. But I think the answer, and the NPA should clarify this, if the answer is the cap dictated by law, and that should be determined from the petroleum pricing formula, then those people are answered.
Okay.
But to conclude, the NPA is now saying they will not even announce the cap. And I think I understand the politics of it. You see, if you are going to be announcing the cap, it's going to be indicative. And then if prices go up, people are going to say that it is government that is shooting prices up. So the NPA that has a responsibility to actually determine the cap are almost saying, well, we will allow you to determine your prices. But when you have finished, we will take a look at it, and if you have gone beyond the cap, we will come in and tell you not to do it. I am not too sure whether we'll be able to enforce the cap properly that way. It may well be that the NPA has to announce the cap.
But is it really true? And that's what a lot of people are apprehensive about. Is it really true that we're going to have prices, you know, go up and down or up every fortnightly?
We remember at the beginning of 2013, this is what we were told, that every 2 weeks, the NPA would sit down and review the cap in accordance with the petroleum pricing formula. Then it broke down. Essentially, what we are being told is that now we are going to do it well. If that is, as I said, if that is what they are going to do, that is the law. That is what they should have done long ago. The challenge, and we are all looking at government carefully, is should crude oil prices drop, and there's a temptation to make money, to extort money
like
from
was done the last time.
Recently, are we still going to have deregulation? And that is where I am looking at the NPA and government, and I say, let's look at them small.
Okay.
You can never really know.
I've heard other persons in this industry say, for as long as what you just said to conclude does not happen, they have no problem, they have no qualms at all with this particular system. Let's allow the system to run. But Koku, do you get the impression, like Koku I think just said a while ago, that just about how many weeks ago we had 9% hike, and then now we're having 4%. So this is a system we intended to start at the latter part of May.
Well, you see, the environment, as Kweku indicated, he's for deregulation.
Yeah.
I suspect he was speaking for his party that has been in government before, and that really was part and parcel of this deregulation process.
Right.
Indeed, it began before the advent of the Kufuor administration. The truth of the matter is that it was somewhere in 1996 that it began in different phases. And under Kufuor, there was an acceleration.
That's true, because a lot of us became more aware of it in Kufuor's regime.
Yes, you know. And so I'm not surprised at all that in principle, Kweku, and for that matter, I suppose, if I'm right, his party will be...
I'm speaking for the law. I'm careful not to speak for my party when I've not been sent.
Yeah, but I'm
if he had said they were against it, I would have pulled up something here.
Yes, I'm only stating the fact.
Sure.
Yeah. And I have enough evidence here anyway to back what I'm saying. So that's what it is. Except that there hadn't been the sufficient political will to operationalize it. Various governments at different times have been forced by the economic reality, the harsh conditions, to put, you know, a freeze on some of those things.
Is it not curious then that the minority is now putting this to an IMF conditionality, rather than something we had intended to implement long ago?
No, there's always a connection also to the IMF. There is. For instance, I have here a letter from the first Deputy Managing Director of IMF, November 14, 2002, to President Kufuor. It was a response to a letter we had sent to them. And you just let me read this for you to see. The third paragraph says, your government, for its part, took decisive measures on energy and utility pricing, developed a strong budget for 2001, and gave the Bank of Ghana the independence it needed to begin bringing down inflation and stabilizing the economy. They were having problems with how things were going downhill. So he comes in to say that we have to do a new program or some other alternatives. And listen to this. It says, first, budget execution has departed substantially from the approved budget underlying the program. Weaknesses in expenditure management, especially control over the wage bill, which began in the late 2001 and worsened in 2002, are the main cause of the additional domestic government borrowing this year. Second, the automatic adjustment formula for petroleum prices, a cornerstone of the program, has been overridden and pump prices kept fixed. Did you hear that? Pump prices kept fixed even as world oil prices rose and the cedi depreciated. As a result, the oil refinery is said to accumulate new debt during 2002, estimated at 2% of GDP, which the government will likely have to take over in service. Against this background, we are much encouraged by your let me read this. So against this background, we are much encouraged by your stated intent to liberalize the oil sector by the end of the year. We hope that this will include abolition of administrated pricing, which will provide helpful protection for Ghana's public finances in the future. That government was committed to deregulation, but they had problems in dealing with it frontally. The Rawlings government had the same problems. I have enough here to show too. So we've been doing up and down thing with that policy. I am not sure, you see, and it's the timing, as I was saying. I have a different ideological stand on some of these things, but the world has moved on, and sometimes it's very difficult to insist on our line. But you see, the truth is that the environment now, in this doomsaw environment, it is not easy when you hike petroleum prices in terms of cost of production. First of all, we are all using generator sets for quite a part of the day. Now that's cost, okay?
A lot of cost.
And that cost will reflect in prices in different areas. So in terms of the timing, it's a very, very, very bold but dangerous policy direction.
Is bold right, but dangerous? Is that what you're saying?
Within
the right thing
within
to
the
do?
kind of economic dynamics that we are operating in this country, clearly we have gone for a market-driven economy. Okay, and this deregulation had meant that Tor even is not expected to import crude. They are to refine. The OMCs are those who are to bring in imported finished products. Am I right?
Well,
is that not where
if Tor also wants to import?
No, they are restricted. What I mean is in terms of percentage.
Oh, sure.
And their core business, we are told, it's all in the document that under the MPP was put out, is to do refinery. And the OMCs are to bring in the imported finished products. That's in terms of the balance, the weight goes in favor of the OMCs.
Right.
No? And I'm saying that in itself has its own effect in terms of pricing. We are told that competition may help to stabilize and bring down. Well, I'm still waiting to see that.
Skeptical about that?
Yes, again, it's also because of perhaps my ideological background.
Because we are already seeing it. There are reports that if you go to Goel
1 is state-owned. Goel did something very good. They decided to keep theirs. For how long? I heard the MD say that they've kept it just to observe the environment, how it goes. They should be careful they are not played out of the competition by seeking to just keep your prices at one place. We haven't yet seen the full picture. I have to be honest. We haven't seen the full picture. But I'm saying that it's because the timing too is such that the ripple effect of hike in this price at this time, it will lead to high cost of production in so many areas, not just those of us who are using gen sets for domestic consumption, but also for industrial and commercial production.
Just to be clear about something small, you were saying that the MPA is reluctant to set the ceiling, but I thought that we knew that it's been raised by 4%, so we know.
That's what I'm saying. This one is not deregulation. That's what this one is. The 4% was the usual
world crude market.
Yeah, exactly, and the deterioration of the cedi.
And again, briefly, how do you deterioration of the cedi? I understand is a key factor. How do you also justify the claim that, or the assertion that this is IMF, imposed?
It is because even though I think it should have been done long ago, this government would not have done it. But then the IMF said...
You mean you're speculating?
Because we have the evidence. In 2014, for instance, if you look at the budget for subsidy, petroleum subsidy, we started with, 50 million Ghana cedis. That was the budget. And I remember we asking government on the finance committee, and government said, it is because we want to remove the subsidies. Effectively, we want to do partial deregulation. It didn't happen. By the close of the year, subsidy alone was over 500 million. So the evidence that government would not have done it is abound.
Okay, so once again, this is speculation because you cannot point me to an IMF document that insists that we ought to implement deregulation.
If you look at all the IMF documents, when they talk about removal of petroleum subsidy, they're actually saying that do deregulation.
That's what
it's as simple as that. So the government has been compelled to do this in these circumstances because really, if a government at the time were having power outages and knew that people are using these fuels for power to get the economy going, wobbling along, even liberalists like me would have been careful to suggest that this is the time to do deregulation, to enforce it as we're doing now. But for government to initiate that now, and I'm even getting the sense that perhaps government wants to go full deregulation. If the IMF insists, that may well happen. I have no doubt that government has been pushed to do what, in my opinion, they should have done long ago because they are going to the IMF to beg for support, and this is what the supporter is saying.
Interesting views there. And Doc, I want you to tell me sincerely, in the midst of everything else that is happening to the economy, and the fact that we know that we ought to bite the bullet, so to speak, this is not the right thing to be doing so that we don't continue to saddle government with having to subsidize and getting into trouble all the time. And I'm linking to the report that The Economist is publishing this morning, which it titles it The Mighty Falling, Ghana, the Mighty Falling. And it says, Africa's former jewel struggles to regain its gleam. And it asks the question, and this is a very opinionated piece, but you will understand that these are the things that they do, so they assert the facts. It says, how do you spot an economic crisis from afar? And then they give you the elements to take to tell that an economy is in crisis. And they refer, number one, to abandonment of building projects. Number two, relentless power cuts, which we have in Ghana, and they say these abound in Ghana. Number three, the currency, which is falling by over a quarter so far this year. And number four, public debt is reaching 70% of GDP this year. And it looks, quite dangerous. A very final bit of it I want to read. It just says that more worrying are the structural problems which were ignored when the economy was rising. Ghana relies on gold and cocoa for foreign earnings, leaving it skint. When prices fall or crops fail, successive leaders have failed to save during boom years, leading to an unhealthy addiction to the IMF, to which it has turned no fewer than 16 times since 1966. So it refers to the fact that cocoa is also our savior. And when it comes to cocoa too, the Reuters is also reporting very damaging stuff about Ghana, and that the Cocoa Marketing Board, it doesn't seem to be doing the right things. And very, very dangerous things. Is it not the time, in the midst of all of this, to take these decisions. Bold decisions?
Yeah, thank you very much, Samson. Fundamentally, governments exist for their people. So when we go to the polls, we are crafting a contract between ourselves and our government, and the government agrees that do this, I'm going to do this. At the end of the day, you are going to judge me by what I do. Fundamentally, I mean, if you are not able to keep your people's heads above water, and that is why John Locke talked about a contract, that the government must be able to safeguard lives, liberty, and property, fundamentally. If you are not able to do these three things, for him, it's a basis for your removal from office, even though Hobbes had a different view. if you look at the deregulation as part of the Washington consensus, issue of privatization, deregulation, foreign exchange, and all of that, this is a policy that I think the fundamental issues will be how do we inject competition into the sector and how do we ensure efficiency? Like using a public choice model, for instance, in decision making at this level. Now, if you look at our governments, and I'm referring to the NDC and NPP, because they have had the opportunity to govern since 1993. If you look at it critically, we have not had that requisite political will to be able to implement, some of these policies religiously, because they are very much, aware of some of the implications, some of the negative spillover effects of some of these policies. So the political will hasn't been there, and we have used subsidies to say that we want to cushion the poor, as it were. That has been the justification. But we want to find out from the economists, I'm a political scientist, whether indeed these subsidies have actually gone into the poor. They will end up supporting some opulent and frivolous lifestyles of some rich people within the country.
And there are those who have very radical claims. They say the money that goes into corruption and waste could have taken care of this, and the poor will not suffer.
But who engaged in corruption? How many? My mother in the village, planting cocoa and growing cassava. Would he have access? Would she have access to some of the contract that we undertake, and out of which people get those kickbacks and so on? So we need to be serious. The elite, who are in control, must also take some of these blames. So people have argued that, well, if we are going to look at subsidies, and that is literally going to undermine the public purse, then what you need to do is go, deregulate. And then perhaps the resources that will be accumulated in the process must then be invested, into some provision of certain social services that will serve as perhaps a social safety net.
You don't trust that even those savings will go into these
well,
social
that is a collective responsibility. If we continue to insist that the resources do go, and that is why in a democracy, accountability and transparency are fundamental. That is why civil society organizations are in there. That is why the media will be in there. Because if all actors are firing on all cylinders, and they are arguing that the public resources must be put where it is, and we push our government to have that necessary political will to say that we have to buy the bullet. Otherwise, we will go through these implementation nightmares. We have been too tactical and too short-termist. We have not been strategic. And therefore, we will see that even when we have to implement, we implement this deregulation in an ad hoc manner and will not yield the results.
Accountability, and you are saying you're putting that burden on the individual,
all of us,
citizens and civil society. But more importantly, that's a job that Parliament should be doing.
Well, all of us. That's what I
said. And the IEA's very latest research on that is very damning. Parliament is not doing that job.
Yeah, see, Parliament has to exercise that oversight. You understand, to ensure. Through the various, select and what do you call it? The standing committees that they have. We are talking about Public Accounts Committee, for instance, very critical in there. These, I think, since 2007, conducting their hearings in public and so on. And the key thing we want to find out whether indeed they have also been able to enforce, some of the findings, among others, to ensure there is discipline in the management of our system. So, really, if there's no transparency in our administration, and we have implementation nightmares that we have, and we've seen this ad hocism, and we've seen short-termism, and we are not able to buy the bullet, as it were, and face the consequences, then we are going to have problems. Of course, the economic problems that have been painted by, the crisis that have been painted by, the Times and the Reuters, I don't think that, yes, they are damning, but even if when we are going through these crises, they can be resolved. We are people who are committed to addressing some fundamental problems, but we need a real bold decisions that will deal with the problems that confront us. For me, if you look at what we experienced last year, where the oil prices, at the world market, fell below even $50. And I did not experience any significant windfall in my pocket as a result of that. I did not. And so when you see, in implementing a major policy, there must also be goodwill in the implementation process. And the goodwill must also be fair. And that ensures if there is policy consistency.
We're told about the difficulties. Government at least was very forthright with
so the difficulties must...
And we're told, we know that there was a debt to the OMCs, which actually led us to a point where we didn't have fuel. So what do we choose?
No, so we had debts. We had debts and you had to clear the debts. We have not been transparent as to how much we collected and how much perhaps savings we made. And we are not even sure how much even the government owes all these oil marketing companies and the bulk and all those who are...
The two of them are having a fight
over even figures as to how much we owe is even in contention. I mean, so we are not... The transparency is not there. So how can you convince me, for instance, that I should tighten my belt so we can, offset some of the debts that we have? So for me, in all of these, something we also need policy consistency. And our governments must also be sincere. You understand? And be transparent with the things that when they are sincere and they are with us, the implementation will not be problematic. Because in all the implementation processes, you will need the support of the people. Otherwise, you create the social upheavals. And because it's a holistic thing, because we have not been able to provide the incentive, the social safety nets, and all the social, like the mass transport systems that we're promising and all of that, because we've not been able to provide all these things, we are not sure whether indeed the full deregulation will not create social upheavals in this country. And don't forget, the politicians are also looking at the next elections. And so they are conscious of that. And that is also feeding into the implementation nightmares that I'm talking about.
That may then defeat the political argument about the fact that the government didn't have the muscle, as it were, to be able to do this. But a government that's going into elections in a year, how many months? And is able to take this decision.
No, but even what we are saying,
you are talking about the implications of that decision.
Yeah, it has implications. Why not? But what we're saying is that, as the Honorable said, it's not even a full deregulation.
Yes,
this is just part of the adjustment that we've been experiencing. What I'm saying is that if we are going down a certain policy, there must be consistency. And in the process, let the people appreciate the dividend. Of course, if there's a windfall from a particular policy implementation, and this windfall will not feed into people's lives. You have problems even coming back to convince us that another policy direction must be supported. People will resist that policy.
Thank you very much. Now, maybe just a minute, let me pick Koko's views on this, and then I'll share with you some of the text messages you are bringing in. Now, transport fares are going up. Supposing the prices, continue to rise, how are we supposed to manage a situation where transport prices will be changing almost, so frequently?
Well, it's free for all. Yeah. That's what we are proposing. Price, and especially this aspect, the stage in which we are getting this is the price deregulation. Okay, but there have been many forms of deregulation already that have been put in place. The emphasis here, the focus here appears to be on the price one.
I see.
And I am saying that I'm not sure that in terms of the economic circumstances of today, this option is sustainable. It might be an inevitable thing to do because within the context of the economic structures we are operating.
Right.
But sometimes you need to bring your political skills in terms of timing, what to do and how to do it. I have a little difficulty with the timing of what we are doing.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Abdul Malik. Now, let me share with you some of the messages that you are bringing to us. Someone says that Clement Osei Kwe says, I don't subscribe to setting up more examination bodies. If it becomes so, these exam bodies will make it a whole business entity with much competition, thereby each entity making it possible for all students who sit for their exams to pass well. For instance, compare the performance of private and public schools. Bediako in UCC says, many have talked about poor security in WAEC processes, but I say no. What is the motivation for people to indulge in these practices? The privileged in society have used these channels for far too long. Akum Aviaka says, yes, that has always been a problem, and technology is currently playing a major role in its spread. So investigations should also be easy using the same technology. But honestly speaking, these leakages are just a byproduct of the state of the country. Musa Abattoir Kumasi says, I am happy some people have been arrested in connection with the leakage of the papers. Well, what we understand really is that the arrest in Kumasi was really someone who was assisting to answer questions and not really about the leakage.
No, but
Spike.
How did he know the questions?
Well,
what answers was he providing? Answers to what?
Oh, I see. Interesting. Spike in Ohio, in the USA, says that it is only in Ghana that after such a leakage, those at the helm of affairs are still at post. I think the WAEC boss should be sacked immediately. Okay, so you are joining the chorus by Nagrat and its members. Tanko Osman says, the leakage is a dent on our educational effort. Everyone is blaming WAEC, which is fair, but how about the teachers who set the questions? Well, they set the questions and give them to WAEC, is that not it? For it takes a long while before it's even published. Okay, Sadat Nabila says that, I still remember the trauma I went through in 2002 when our BECE was cancelled. Not until it was cancelled, we in the rural schools did not know what was going on. Okay. Bashir Abubakar says BECE is the most corrupt institution here in Ghana. BECE is not an institution. Okay, thank you very much. You meant to say WAEC, right? But you should back what you say with evidence. That is most important. Vespa says, what do we expect if people... okay, you are pointing fingers at specific persons without any evidence. So I'm sorry, I'm unable to share your message. Thank you very much. I'm going to take a quick break here, and thankfully, we're being joined by the Honorable Haruna Idrisu. We'll be right back. Welcome to the show, Honorable Haruna Idrisu.
Yeah, thank you very much,
Great.
Samson.
Right, now let's, you missed on the BEC issues and also on the deregulation matters. So let's briefly find out what you have to say, maybe a word of encouragement or how to psych up pupils who are traumatized together with their parents for the receipt, which is the 29th and 30th.
Yeah, first of all, let me apologize to you personally and to your very distinguished panelists and to your listeners for having to come in late. I got caught up with some Ramadan challenges of having to wake up early and get back to sleep. In the wake of all this labor crisis, you can pardon and forgive me. Now on BEC, I think that it's important that all of us uphold the highest principles and values of integrity in what we do. And it's applicable, most importantly, to teachers in respect of this matter. And many of the pupils have become casualties or victims of the acts of omissions or commissions of other persons. And it undermines confidence, even in the respectability of what certificates they would get. It gets the school people destabilized emotionally and psychologically, and that can affect their academic performance overall. But I trust that our young people will be up to the task. It's also important, when I listened to your panelists earlier, my attention was drawn to, if you monitored global news, I think in Brussels or Paris, there was a similar development of a particular standard of education papers looking at thanks to technology, its use and abuse can always have a consequence. So I believe that our people should get themselves prepared. They should warm up and do the receipt. We expect that the Minister for Education and the Ghana Education Service will do that which is appropriate to ensure that it becomes a much successful event. But I should also say that whoever is responsible must be punished accordingly, as was recommended by your panelists and some text messages which came in.
Right. Petroleum deregulation. Well, the political question is, this certainly is a bold step by a government that is looking for re-election. But the other issue is that why are you veiling it? This is IMF asking you to do what ought to be done.
Something that is my concern and worry when we seek to trivialize policy decisions and cloud down what the essence of that policy is. And I'm happy I listened to my colleague. Petroleum deregulation of the downstream sector.
Right.
And you are a trained lawyer. Act 2005. What does it tell you? It means an act of parliament of 2005. So government is a continuum. There was a cabinet in 2005 which approved the deregulation of the petroleum sector, which culminated in the establishment of the National Petroleum Authority and the subsequent passage of LI 2186 of the petroleum sector. Among other things, it was to ensure full cost recovery and that there was efficiency and liberalization of that particular sector. What has been outstanding all this period is the liberalization of the pricing formula of that sector. To the extent that you and your panelists and other experts are asking government, what mitigating measures will you have for the category of Ghanaians who may not be able to cope with this major policy decision? I'm in harmony with you. But if your concern is you are yielding to IMF, and let me borrow your words again and say that for President Mahama and government, it is not about what is easy or what is difficult. It is about what is right. But it comes with a price and a cost, which cost is what we all must seek to address. Deregulation started in 2005. The process is not completed yet. We are now seeking through the revision of the MPA Act 691, LI 2186, and I'm aware that my colleague, the Minister for Petroleum, have placed this for Cabinet's attention. Once Cabinet gives its approval, it subsequently will refer it to Parliament for its consideration. But we are not talking about full deregulation. We are simply saying that the MPRA, in the exercise of its mandate, is saying that we are seeking to liberalize the pricing formula for petroleum products. And my very good colleague,
rather, I am hearing
my very good colleague,
I'm hearing you completing the communication. If the communication from the start, you know, had gone in the manner you are communicating it, I'm sure that these problems may not have been raised, the concerns, particularly pursuant to the act.
Absolutely. So what government now is seeking, we will place before Parliament an amendment to the act and to the accompanying
which you say is already before
instrument.
Cabinet.
It's before Cabinet. I know that there was some request of the President for the Minister for Petroleum and the Attorney General to look into it to see how the deregulation is pursued within the context of the prevailing law. An appropriate amendment which will support whether full deregulation or deregulation, as you may call it. But let me also say that my colleague is aware, Honorable Kwarteng is aware that, and I encourage you personally, Samson, to look at it. The MEFP that we signed with the IMF is a public document. You can look into every single detail of it, what government has agreed. I've heard argument that government agreed to labor retrenchment. That cannot be true. That can never be accurate. Government said that there must be payroll reforms and there must be rationalization. It's not the same thing as you want to embark on an exercise of reducing numbers within the public and the civil service. Now,
deregulation in some quarters, is defined to include retrenchment.
And for our purposes, it doesn't include that. The emphasis of our partnership with the IMF is to see how we reduce fraud associated with the operation of the payroll. And there's some evidence which gives a clue that there must be reforms in how the Controller Accountant General operates in terms of allowing for private sector even participation where necessary. But the point I was trying to make is that my colleague is a brilliant economist, and he knows that we must share with the Ghanaian people what is the cost of not deregulating. You simply are saying that the public must debate the context of government continuing to subsidize prices of petroleum products. As I understand it as of today, government loses 78 million Ghana cedis every month attributable to subsidizing prices of petroleum products. You need to take a decision whether you want to continue to be able to do it or not. But I know that it hurts the economy and it hurts the fiscal because we are always not able to meet that particular requirement. I mean, in terms of even how much is paid to BDCs for foreign exchange losses, and I just give you a practical example. There's a businessman who walked into my office, and I can agree when Ghanaian businesses express those legitimate concerns. He says that, look, Haruna, when I was bidding for the contract from your ministry, the dollar exchange rate was 3.2. It is now 4.2. Can I apply for a variation of the price order? Naturally, I should accommodate that. Government itself must accommodate that. We pay colossal sums of money.
There's provision for that in the procurement tax.
Government pays colossal sums of money in terms of managing even just foreign exchange losses. But ultimately what is important for government is the continuous free flow of petroleum products. But I agree that it has an inelastic demand, and therefore we should be looking at the have-nots and how they are able to cope with the adjustment.
That's a central question that some are asking.
Legitimate.
How does the NDC ideologically, sit with this?
How is that consistent with our ideological
yes, because this is free market.
Who will tell you the good answer? Reality check. There is ideology and the reality of dealing with a swelling government expenditure which has to be managed. Yes. And you must appreciate that apart from paying for the foreign exchange losses, we want at all times that petroleum products are available in the country. I also do agree that even a more worrying concern today, I'm sure Kweku probably raised it, I was then in the vehicle trying to get down, is even the current foreign exchange problems associated with the depreciation of the cedi will itself reflect in increases in petroleum prices. So if the minority of some of our colleagues were saying that there's been hikes in petroleum prices as a result of the deregulation policy of government, I have no difficulty with it. But if you simply trivialize it and say, because it's an IMF conditionality, we are begging the issue. Even under them were with the IMF. There was a fund program between 2005 up to 2009. We discontinued and we are back there. I think we should work towards improving the fiscal stabilization of this economy. And we cannot achieve same if we do not harness some of the resources within the petroleum sector for the general good of the Ghanaian people. So I think that I only agree with them that government must be mindful of the consequence of this deregulation program on the poor and the have-nots and those who are not able to cope. And we should roll out mitigating measures that will be able to address it. Because fact remains that a category of Ghanaians may be able to cope with a liberalized petroleum environment of price increases arising out of the deregulation. There is, however, a category of Ghanaians who may not be able to cope. Right. That's why they are concerned about increases in prices of lorry fare, whether the person was commuting from Medina or Somania or from
and we know the implications of that. Absolutely. It affects everything. So it affects the size of the KKI bar.
In trying to get government to act on it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Haruna Idrisu.
Quickly, Haruna has put a very important piece of information in the discussions.
Okay.
Namely that there's a bill, an amendment coming that would seek to liberalize the formula. My only reading of that is that we are actually going to do away with the formula, because once you liberalize it and each can price their petroleum prices, their fuel prices the way they want, then we are going in terms of price full deregulation. And if that is the case, then the NPA must watch the rhetoric they are putting out now, because the impression they are giving us is that there's going to be a certain cap, and that if you go beyond the cap, your attention will be drawn. It is this kind of inconsistency that has attended government's management of even the partial deregulation the law allows now. Now, quickly.
30 seconds.
30 seconds. I personally have never opposed deregulation or having a cap which is partial deregulation. What we have worried about has been a certain dishonest application of deregulation, where when it is convenient.
Okay, I think you've mentioned
yeah,
this
exactly.
already.
When it's
so,
convenient,
yes,
you don't apply it.
Right.
And then when crude oil prices go down, you don't. If we go down that line again, no, Samson, let me land properly. If we go down that line again, deregulation itself will become such a discredited policy that it will be difficult to go back to.
All right, thank you for that intervention also.